What up, YouTube? I am Sean Gardner. Thanks for coming back to the channel. This is Kick It Culture, and thanks for kicking it with me. Today, I wanted to talk about misconceptions of introversion and how it relates to success. Being an introvert myself, I think I do have the experience, maybe shed some light on the matter. And for anyone else who maybe feeling the same way, hopefully they can take something away from it. So I have an article from lifehack.org that I'd like to go over and discuss some of the points a little bit in detail. I'll leave a link in the description box below if you want the full article. Let's just get into it. All right, so the title of the article is 16 Things You Might Have Misunderstood About Introverts by Scott Christ. Now, I'm not going to go over every single point, but I am going to go over several, as I do think they are pretty relevant and they do have some merit to introvert personality type. All right, misconception number one, introverts are shy. Being shy and introverted are two completely different things. Introverts are not necessarily shy or afraid of people. They just don't prefer talking for the sake of talking. And yeah, this is a pretty common one. I would say most of my life I would be considered shy or reserved, anything of that nature, right? When in reality, it's just, I would think, more selective than anything else. I think being shy and introverted are two different things. I think if you're genuinely shy as a person, you have had to have gone through something to make you be that way, where you completely disregard people in that way. Like you don't want to connect with people. Introversion is not necessarily that. Introversion is just more dealing with your own internal world, right? Being more entertained by that than anything else external. So it's not that we're afraid of people. I think it's just more of an indifference to want to engage with people rather than being afraid to do so. All right, misconception number two, introverts are unemotional. Introverts may not show emotion with their facial expressions and gestures, but this doesn't mean they're not interested in what you're saying. Introverts prefer to control their emotions around others and internalize them. Although someone who's introverted may not appear engaged, this is usually not the case. So yeah, I think this supports the first misconception as well. I don't think it's that introverts are unemotional and that we can't express ourselves wholly like what other people perceive as to be normal, right? It's just that we internalize everything a little bit more acutely than others. Not to say one is better than the other. It's just a different way of kind of thinking and a different way of approaching life that we choose not to show our emotions on any kind of given situation, right? So even if it's something that's kind of benefiting us, all the way down to if we're getting kind of screwed over on something, more often than not, we're really not going to show our emotion. We're not going to display it. And it's not to say that we're not engaged in conversation with somebody who is trying to bring emotion out of us, right? Because I think a lot of introverts go through this challenge as well, as being with someone who's very extroverted and very kind of high energy and wants to kind of impose that on you, right? And that's a little unfair. It's kind of like trying to just change who you are as a person when I don't think they would appreciate it if it was the opposite way, right? I think there's like a funny meme that is like, you know, there's, extroverts always are going around like, why are you so quiet, right? Which is a little bit rude in my opinion, because introverts don't go around to extroverts saying like, yo, why are you so loud? You know what I mean? Like, calm down. You know what I mean? Because that would be considered kind of rude. It's just if that's how you are and that's your personality, rock on, do you. You're not hurting anybody, right? And I think that's just a big misconception about engaging with an introvert. So, misconception number three, introverts don't like working in groups. Introverts often do their best work alone, so coworkers may misunderstand them and think that they don't want to partake in group work. While introverts do have a tendency to shut down in larger groups of people when they feel like their voice isn't being heard, introverts excel in small group situations and enjoy working in these types of environments, as long as their opinion is valued. Now, to be honest, I'm a little on the fence on this one, but I wanted to mention it nonetheless. Um, I'm an introvert down to the core, and I work in sales environment. And in my job, it's very group focused, right? I don't know if I necessarily enjoy the group work in my environment. It could just be how it's set up and things of that nature. However, I do know that when I do work on my own, I do feel like I am a bit more comfortable and I feel like I can get things done a bit more efficiently, right? Now, that doesn't mean I'm doing things always the right way or even the most efficient way. I just feel like for me, working alone, I feel like I can work efficiently and to the best of my ability, right? Without any interruptions, really, or distractions, really. Interruptions or distractions. Now, the reason I say I'm on the fence about it is because prior to getting into sales, I've been part of many group situations where I don't think I was nearly as challenged or felt that I wasn't as part of the group or that I wasn't bringing as much value to the group. For instance, I've been an athlete pretty much all my life, and despite not being one of maybe like the top players on the any given team that I've played for, I definitely felt like I did provide some value, and I did have people in my corner to boost me up and to give me a bit of confidence, to be on the field with them, right? Another example would be I used to do warehouse work. I used to work in warehouses and pretty much just build pallets and move things from here to there. And I remember being part of certain groups of people that, although we had certain objectives, we all kind of worked as cogs in a machine. And as long as we all did our own part, the machine worked smoothly. The machine worked great. So as long as you just have integrity and show up and show out the way to your best of your ability, I think it's possible to do fine work by yourself. And I think it's possible to do great work in a group setting, right? I'm not opposed to it. But I think like the misconception says, it has to be kind of valued and we have to feel like we're a part of it. I think too many times introverts are kind of left out of the conversation because we ourselves take ourselves out of the conversation. We automatically feel like because so many people speak up more often than not, whether it may be just a banter or whether it may be to actually bring something of value to the conversation, they're always speaking. On the other hand, introverts really don't take that risk and take that chance, despite maybe having some real valuable information to provide, right? So I'm not too sure about that one just yet. So misconception number 6, all introverts are poor public speakers. Some introverts may not like speaking in large group settings. However, many introverts are naturally gifted speakers, and introverts generally spend more time preparing for speeches and presentations rather than flying by the seat of their pants. So, yeah, this is a pretty common one as well, I think. I mean, just by my own personal experience, growing up, I was always told that I was very good at like expressing myself, and I guess you could say articulate, right? Never really felt that way personally, but I always felt like I was just speaking normal. Most introverts do take a lot of time to prepare when it comes to publicly speaking. I remember when I was in school, especially when I had to do like presentations in front of my class, that was something I dreaded wholly, and I never wanted to do those type of projects. So I remember often like doing like you know um, index cards and writing down word for word what I would say to the for the presentation to the class, and it's kind of just going over it over and over and over and over, so I can just memorize it basically when I'm up in front of a classroom. And I think the very same is true for many other introverts. Like we just like to prepare and over prepare so that when we're in front of people and we have to engage, especially in a more professional setting, it comes off pretty buttery smooth, right? Even to transition to something like sales, like what I'm doing now, yeah, I basically have scripts. Each sales environment has typical scripts that you would give to your employees to kind of learn and get used to, so that you can pitch to clients and so that they can make the client more comfortable to buy in, right? The very much same as for me and where I'm at in my job. I definitely have certain criteria of like rhetoric that I try to employ in my pitches that I pretty much have down to a T that I just do over and over and over every client, every chance I get. So it's pretty much just memorized and it's become so second nature, I guess you could say at this point, doing it for close to 4 years, that yeah, it just comes out natural, you know, and it's because of the preparation and practice in doing so. Misconception number 9: introverts don't like to go out in public. False. Introverts may not be comfortable in crowded spaces, but love experiencing new places, people, and things. And yeah, I would say I would agree with that. Most of my life growing up, I had the extreme privilege of being able to travel pretty often. I had family in Puerto Rico that I visited quite often, almost every summer as a youth, right? And various other situations growing up, I was able to experience countries overseas, and those are pretty, great experiences. I don't think being an introvert deters people from wanting to go out and experience the world, right? Again, it's kind of like the whole shy thing. Like being shy and afraid in that way is basically saying like you don't want to go out and learn about the world. And I don't think that's true. If anything, introverts find that type of stuff very appealing. Learning about outside of their environment where they grew up, visiting different cultures, whether it be um, different state or just a whole different country. Right? Most introverts that I know, they love that type of stuff. They love that type of stuff. Misconception number 11: introverts are underachievers. Because we have such an affinity for the charismatic, personable, extroverted leader, some people assume that introverts are underachievers compared to extroverts. However, there are millions of successful introverted scientists, artists, physicians, writers, and philosophers. Achievement is not necessarily related to a personality type. I definitely agree by this as well. All my life, I've been put in situations to not only challenge myself mentally, but physically. Um, and I think in most situations, I think I did grow by being placed in those environments. Um, Soccer was a great example for me. I'm kind of a smaller guy, so I don't really have this intimidating presence. But I would say most teams that I've been on, I've had a positive impact, and I was able to keep up with those around me, right? And I mean, me being at least like 5'5" for most of my career playing soccer, playing against people who are, 6 foot or above, more often than not, um, is pretty. It can be pretty intimidating, right? But when you get thrown into like the wolves den just every day, right? You get used to that shit, right? And you kind of just build up this kind of character of well, hey, if this is what it is, you gotta make it do. Make it do what it do, So yeah, I think society and the world at large basically doesn't highlight introverted people and definitely doesn't champion them the way they do extroverted people. In most of media and like books, you always are seeing like the main character be this, more often than not, this bold, brash, brave, kicking the door, making my own way type of um character. And there are just as many people in the world that have that same type of impact, but do it in a much more subtle and non-spectacle type of way, right? They don't need that type of validation to say like, "Hey, this is who I am and this is what I stand for." They also, in the very same way, have that conviction to follow through with what they believe, right? Um, one thing I can think about is something like Harry Potter. I think like in the beginning of his journey, right, he was kind of like labeled like this little like nerd, like introverted kind of kid, and amongst his peers and family that he grew up with, he wasn't really seen as valued. But the moment he got the opportunity to be around people like himself and people that understood him and where he could go, um, the curiosity of Harry Potter got the best of him, and he was able to flourish into one of the most powerful wizards that ever, lived in his time, right? So it's kind of like that. It's like people can see you one way, but if you just get the right opportunity and the right environment to challenge yourself and to cultivate your talents, you can become one of the greatest things. You can become the best version of yourself. Misconception number 12: introverts can break out of their shell and become extroverts. Introversion is an inborn personality type that you cannot change. Many people falsely believe that introverts can change or want to unlearn their quiet, passive tendencies. And here's another common one. Um, Quite often at my own job, I get this idea thrown around about sales as a transfer of energy, which I 100% believe. Basically, the idea is if you're excited and if you have this smile on your face and you're relaying this great information to the client, they're going to respond as such. They're going to get all excited and they're going to be all happy with you, which I do agree with to a degree. Now, if you're that type of person who behaves that way naturally, that is definitely going to work for you. Customers will definitely eat that up and they will respond as such, right? But for people who are naturally introverted and who don't display that type of behavior on the regular, it's definitely going to come off as inauthentic, right? And that's the last thing you want when it comes to a business, right? So for me, I've always conducted business as myself and I've always conducted business as an introvert. I'm very clear and concise and I'm very, you know, open about what we're going over in terms of business. And I come across as genuine that way. Now, it doesn't have to be um, the I don't even know how to do it, right? Like, it doesn't even have to be the like, oh yeah, like you're gonna get this great deal, type of behavior for me and people like me. All we have to do is just be our genuine self and relay the information correctly, and they're gonna get that same transfer of energy. They're gonna receive that as he's not BSing me, and they're gonna work with me. Misconception number 15: introverts don't make good leaders. Introverts can be quiet but confident leaders. They can be particularly effective at managing extroverts because they're good listeners and they don't compete with them. Yeah, I definitely agree with this. I don't think I've ever myself been put in like a leadership role. I think I've kind of um, avoided things like that because of my introversion. I don't think I've had the right perspective of it most of my youth growing up, but I'm starting to understand now as an adult that introversion can be used as a powerful tool for leadership, specifically in this way. I think a lot of introverts can be very level headed, can assess situations very objectively, and once have all the correct information to make a good decision, make that decision and have a team of extroverts to carry out that decision with them and execute like clockwork. I believe that's actually a supreme recipe for success right there. And I don't think it's the only recipe for success, right? I think you can be an extroverted leader as well and get things done. I think that's what I have in my current environment where I work. Very extroverted personality types, most of them, and they all have this get it done type of attitude. But someone like myself, I think, who's the complete opposite, I stick out like a sore thumb, but I've always been able to keep up. I've always been able to keep up, and I've always been able to get my job done just as efficiently. And the last one, misconception number 16: extroverts are happier than introverts. Happiness has nothing to do with one's personality type. There are happy and unhappy extroverts just like introverts. Personality type doesn't predispose you to unhappy. So, yeah, I think this is another common one. I think a lot of people think that just because you're reserved and introverted, that you're somehow unhappy and not enjoying life, which is wild because there are plenty of people who seemingly have it all who are like miserable behind closed doors, right? Some even out in the open. But I think the opposite is true for most introverts. I think we have some sense of peace especially when we are kind of to ourselves, that again, we just don't seek external validation. We don't seek external approval. You know, we kind of already know ourselves to a degree of how we operate and what makes us us and what makes us comfortable in our own skin. And I think a lot of the times we try to get knocked off of that foundation by people who don't maybe know themselves and people who don't really want to take the time to understand that there's different types of people in the world, right? But I think with some of these points, many of these introverts can definitely adapt and behave like extroverts when it seems right and when it seems like it benefits everybody. But that doesn't mean that we want to be extroverts. It doesn't mean that we're trying to change. We're just trying to adapt to a situation to benefit the whole. So those have been my thoughts on today's video on introversion and how it relates to success. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram at I am Sean Gardner. And don't forget to like and subscribe the video. And I'll check you guys on the next one.